Hi, my name is Shevya Awasthi, and today I'm going to be discussing the Hinkley, California groundwater contamination. Today we'll be going over the objectives of this presentation, the 1952 to 1966 PG&E dumping, what is chromium-6, the class action lawsuit against PG&E, the aftermath of the lawsuit, and a summary of the groundwater contamination. So the objectives of today's presentation are to discuss what occurred in Hinkley, California, understand what is chromium-6 and its negative health effects, review the class action lawsuit and its results, and learn more about the cleanup and aftermath. So between 1952 and 1966, PG&E used hexavalent chromium, also known as chromium-6, to combat corrosion in cooling tower water. The wastewater from the cooling towers was released into unlined ponds. However, some of the wastewater spread into the groundwater. In the map indicated on the right, the dark tan area is the groundwater basin where the chromium contamination leaked into. This led to hexavalent chromium pollution in this groundwater, which spanned 8 miles long and 2 miles wide. So before we move on, let's discuss what exactly is chromium-6. Hexavalent chromium is a form of the element chromium, which is generally used for anti-corrosion purposes, which is why PG&E was using it in its water cooling towers. Health risks of drinking chromium-6 contaminated water include stomach cancer, liver and reproductive system damage, decreased body weight, and delayed skeletal development. A 2009 study looked at the relationship between chromium and the development of cancer in rats and mice after chronic oral exposure. They looked at sodium dichromate dihydrate for testing because it's the primary base material for the production of chromium compounds. After exposing these mice for 2 years to SDD-contaminated water at different concentration levels, the study found that those mice that were exposed at higher concentration levels had a higher incidence of death due to carcinoma. So finally, in 1987, PG&E reported the high levels of chromium-6 in the groundwater to the state of California. The state of California ordered a study to be done and found that chromium-6 levels were actually 10 times higher than the regulation that was set in 1977, which was 50 micrograms per liter. However, PG&E bought the properties affected by the contamination and continued to tell people that the water was okay for drinking and agricultural use. Many residents began to feel the health effects of the chromium exposure, and eventually Aaron Brockovich, who was a paralegal in Hinkley, took legal action against PG&E alongside originally 77, however later on 648 plaintiffs. PG&E tried to debunk the linkage between chromium-6 and the residents' health issues, but finally settled to pay $333 million to end the usage of chromium-6 in their cooling systems and to clean up for the environment that they polluted. The distribution of the PG&E settlement was split between legal fees and the 648 plaintiffs. $37 million went towards the legal fees and $296 million went towards the 648 plaintiffs. The plaintiffs split the $296 million based off of who was affected by the chromium contamination the most. However, overall, the residents of Hinkley were fairly unsatisfied with the legal team's representation of them. They were upset with how long the legal team held on to settlement money for before finally giving it to them, and there was still some uncertainty as to how much the legal team actually took. Was it $37 million or more towards almost half of the PG&E settlement? Overall, the residents were upset with their representation and did not feel adequately supported by the legal team. So in the aftermath of the settlement, by 2012, PG&E had completely failed to clean up the hexavalent chromium plume and finally resorted to buying houses from the residents and destroying them. 2/3 of residents affected by the contamination did agree to sell their homes to PG&E and move out. However, this caused Hinkley's population to drastically dwindle and consequently turn what was once a vibrant community into a ghost town. This also struck a heavy blow to Hinkley's economy and morale. In this bar graph here, we can follow Hinkley's population between 2005 and 2019. As mentioned previously, once PG&E started buying houses and destroying them from the residents in 2012, there was a drastic decrease in the population. What was once a population of 1,000 plus, from 2012 onwards dropped to below 800 and has stayed that way ever since. The drastic decrease in the population led to a displacement, loss of livelihood, violation of human rights, and a loss of landscape or sense of place for the residents. Due to PG&E's inability to properly contain the chromium contamination in the groundwater in Hinkley, chromium levels have continued to persist in the area. The USGS conducted a study between March 2015 and March 2017 where they looked at the PG&E sites on the east side of Hinkley and took water samples to look at the chromium levels at each of these sites. The chromium levels here vary between 0.5 micrograms per liter all the way to 4 micrograms per liter. So in 2013, the California Department of Public Health set the maximum contaminant level of hexavalent chromium to 10 micrograms per liter. This MCL proposal was higher than the 0.02 micrograms per liter goal that was set by the OEHHA in 2011. So the levels contained here in Hinkley for chromium, while they are below the California's set level of 10 micrograms per liter, they still are above the goal that was set in 2011, meaning that there still is some persistence of chromium contamination in the area. So to give you a recap of what occurred in Hinkley, California, chromium-6 is a proven carcinogen that contaminated the groundwater in Hinkley after PG&E dumped water waste from its cooling towers into ponds in the surrounding area, which then leaked into groundwater which was used by the residents. After increased reports of health issues from Hinkley residents, 648 plaintiffs filed a class action lawsuit against PG&E and won a settlement of $333 million. Despite efforts to clean up the environment in Hinkley, the city still suffers from chromium-6 contaminated waters, and the town has since been deserted by many of its residents. This is a reference list of sources I used for this presentation. Thank you so much for listening.